know what this makes me think of? Ron Burgundy.
Coming to you live from WCTV in Wilmington. This is episode 6 of Lost in Translation with Bobby Martin. I'm Sam Perkins, and we are joined today by Yann Kumin, who goes by Q.
Hello.
I knew him as Coach Q. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, man, I really want to thank you guys for having me here today. It's great
Q.
to be here.
Welcome.
So I've been wanting to have Q on. Q is our first guest, number one. We've been wanting to start guests. And
Bold
to
moves.
me, Q is, one, he has the gift of gab like us, which is good. He's opinionated. Also a really, really just fascinating person and personal story. Grew up in the area, grew up biracial, went through a lot of stuff, then wound up going to Harvard. I played a little football. Then he was a longtime football coach and teacher, and had several things in his personal life: illness, personal revelations. Finally left the coaching field, and that was a very big thing. I had the opportunity to be an assistant coach for Q for one season. I was the worst assistant coach that he has ever had.
That's a bold statement. Yeah, you had a lot. I'll say you had a lot of room for growth.
Yeah. Had a lot going on in my personal life that year that was not at my best.
True.
And to be honest, Q was someone that I always really looked up to as a person. We first met, I was coaching at the school that he was teaching at, and I was actually a good coach back then, or a decent coach back then.
Still are.
And we encountered each other via mutual contact, social media, and we used to talk politics, social stuff, all sorts of stuff. And when he had a need, I applied for the job, and then all these things happened, and it was not what... I just wasn't at my finest. And for several years after that, we were still connected on social media, and I would like his stuff. Maybe I would comment every once in a while. But I had a really deep shame of this being someone that I really looked up to, that I really felt like I had let down when he gave me an opportunity. And it was a very long time before I sort of reached out. And I don't know if it was before your kind of big announcement on Facebook or if it was after, but I had reached out at some point, and Q, still embraced me and wasn't shaming me about anything. And it was I had a lot of, we talked about guilt when we were talking about, with Jack and just the inherent Jewish guilt that I carry around anyways from my mom. That was
Christian
genetically.
guilt also.
There's all there.
Everybody's guilty. Everybody's
all faith.
But socially, Jews, they just bear their.
No, y'all are pros. I'm not saying I got a Jewish mother too, so like she's a pro. She's the Tiger Woods of guilt.
But Q was really, and it really meant so much to me. And there are other people out there that I feel like I have definitely let down when I was going through things in life, and I'm working hard to try and make amends with people, but I really appreciated Q giving me the opportunity to sort of stay connected and have the opportunity to prove that maybe that was a not my typical reliability or presentation. So, but Q, thank you so much for joining us, and maybe you could... It's pretty open-ended in what direction you'd like to go about your journey, your personal journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm just really happy to be here with y'all. We were just kind of chopping it up a little bit before we got on the air, and it's really cool what you guys are doing. I've listened to 2 of your episodes already. I said to Perk, I got you all pegged on my Spotify, so
nice.
so that I can hear it. And now that I put a face to, Bobby's name and stuff like that, and we were able to share some laughs while Sam was getting coffee, man, it's just really cool to be here.
He's a large man.
He walked in, I'm like, damn, homie, you tall, bro. You were tall. And then I immediately hated that I said that, because I guarantee you that his entire life, that's been like, wow, you're tall, Bobby.
My entire life I've been around tall people, man. My family was a family of giants.
There you go. I'm the dwarf in mine. It's a problem. And yeah, man, I think you summed up our meeting really well. That was kind of a rocky year of just coaching performance for you, but I'm sure you'll talk about a lot of that stuff honestly on your podcast, because you're a tremendously open person, and it's always been something that I do really respect in you, Sam, is that you're very willing to be open and vulnerable and to share your story and your realities and your failures, with people in a manner that's not judgmental, or pejorative, like you're trying to bring anybody down with a cloud of guilt, So I want you to know, man, that, yeah, from a football coaching perspective, it wasn't a great performance, that's fine. But there was never any sort of, bad blood or anything like that. And I got a really good friend out of the deal, so I think I really look at it and say, like, I'm coming out ahead, that we had a kind of cruddy 3 months together, but, we've been down now for 4 or 5 years after that. And
now, what was the cruddy 3 months because of coaching, or was it just football?
It was hard for me to be, I was going through custody fight for my son.
Right in it too.
Yeah,
like
it was
right
right
in it.
And things are great now. Now I got him, half the time, and he's happy, and he's got 2 great homes. But it was like the very beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not the most reliable. I also was working for a school, and we're going to talk about schools. I was teaching for a school that had a habit of promising me one thing and then not following through. So, like, I was supposed to be getting out at a certain time when I committed to the job to be able to get over there. And instead, I'm getting out, half an hour later, 45 minutes later, so that I'm, like, running over to practice as everybody's coming out onto the field every day. And it's hard, to be fully focused on that when you've got stuff and just own personal demons, depression, all that sort of stuff, was financially was in a terrible place from, lawyers are expensive. Also, I was horrifically underpaid at the school that I was at. So it was just a bad time, man. And so it was hard for me to be mentally fully focused on everything that goes with coaching. And I mean, Q ran a very, very,
tight ship.
very, very tight, demanding program. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like a bunch of different rivers coming together at the same point in time, and it just for Sam, for Perk, and it was just kind of,
rivers together, hence the whirlpool.
That was probably the worst, that I have been as far as performance at any job, being able to just focus on it because of all the things going on in my life, and so it was. Yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an interesting fall. I mean, it was an interesting fall in a lot of ways, man. And again, like, I mean, I talk about this a little bit in my book, and we'll talk about it later, but like, there was a lot of me that was diving very, very hard into ball for a specific reason. Mm-hmm. So at the time, it was much more difficult for me to empathize with somebody who was going through like struggles in their non-professional or their non-football life, because I was, ostriching from mine in ball, right, by devoting an inordinate amount of time to this job. And so that was part of the, like, me being like, come on, man, we all got problems, man. We all got to do this thing. But at the same point, I'm not fighting for the custody of my kid. Like, I had my own problems, and they were big problems, but it wasn't presenting like that. You know what I mean? And so, like, again, I learned from that experience, man. Like, and I think that that's really the one thing I'd love if anybody out there is, a coach or whatever listening to this is, especially if you're a head coach, is, empathy is your strongest weapon, man, to manage a good staff. And I would say to manage a good set of players and student athletes too, because, if you can't demonstrate to people that you care about them, and that you can work to understand what is happening in their life, you're never going to be able to get the best out of them. And that's supposed to be what it is that we're about, right, as coaches. So
absolutely.
That to me was a really cool experience and a growth for me.
It didn't help that we kept losing until the end of the year.
Dude, that was just a rough year. I mean, we could talk about football, but like
that's not the.
That was a rough year.
But I mean, there was there were at least 2 Division I players on that team.
There was a lot of talent on that team, but they were our first. We took over when I came to the town I coached in it. I don't know if I air it or what. Yeah, I was at Belmont, and I inherited a team that had been 1-21 in the previous 2 seasons.
A lot of room for growth.
A lot of room for growth. And they had gone 0-11 the season before. And so that class, when Perk got there, had been our first freshman class. So they were the first class that had gone all the way through, and there was some talent there, and they sort of assumed that that was going to be sufficient. Like, we were Q's first class, we're in the new culture, we're decent.
And they'd started winning.
Now, who is they assumed? Who is they?
The seniors of that
Oh,
group
my goodness.
had this assumption that, like, we've been here through this transition for 4 years. We're the whole new breed. We're Q's guys. We're this new culture team.
Gotcha.
But the cohesiveness, the accountability, the work ethic, the stuff that makes teams, championship teams or great teams. You know, we went 6-4, 5-6 the following year, 6-4 because we dropped a game the year after that. You know, first 2 consecutive winning records the town had seen in like 20 years or something like that. And you know, so we had the horses to do the stuff, but we didn't have that identity and that willingness to sacrifice for your fellow man that's necessary to be a great team.
Right.
As we saw last night with the Boston Celtics.
Well, there you go. Talent is not enough. It's never enough.
It's never enough. And you know, it's a big part of it. It
Yep.
can be, you can't win without it.
It's great in the beginning.
Yeah.
Bobby and I talked about our last episode. It's going to air soon. We talked about resiliency as a big thing of Bobby's, and we were talking about
Yeah.
and in the AAU episode too before that, where we talked about that, you know, how there these kids out there that are very talented for high school players, but that almost none of them are talented enough that they can. All it takes is talent. You know, people don't realize in the grand scheme of things till they deal with someone like Bobby. Like, Bobby was one of the 20 best high school players in the country his senior year. He was McDonald's All-American, you know, and that they don't realize your greatness even in your region. You might be the best player in your frickin' region, but that there are an awful lot of other kids that you're going to come up against someone that, like, is just going to run you over, and that your talent is not enough to just be like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm the shit. That like.
Well, you know, when we look at the players today and we look at the coaches, I mean, is all their efforts are geared towards improving their talent physically.
Yeah.
There is little to no focus on who they have to become.
Yep.
You know, mentally, emotionally. And it's always about being tough. No, I mean, one of the things you've actually got to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that you say that, and I hate to keep like plugging the book, right? Like, there's a whole section.
Is there a book?
There is a book. There is a book. It's on, you can see it. There's a whole section about that. You know, about that true strength exists in vulnerability. You know, that you can never be a great team unless you're prepared to be vulnerable to one another. You can never be a great coaching staff unless you're willing to be vulnerable to one another. You know, and the notion that vulnerability is not weakness at all. And to be perfectly frank, neither is fear. You know, it's strength exists in accepting your vulnerability and being able to share it and not feel no kind of way about what that does to your sense of self. Right. And as it relates to fear, is your ability to be afraid and to walk into something, into the darkness regardless. And that, you know, this whole, you know, I talk a lot, especially in football and considering what we're here to talk about today, about the relationships with things like toughness and masculinity and manhood and strength, and these words that they get thrown into the faces of these young people over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't mean this pejoratively, but in many cases by men who don't fully understand what they mean in the first place.
You're kidding. No.
They're just saying that shit. You know why? Because it got said before. And you know why? It got said to those guys before them, and it got said to those guys before them. But the willingness to take the time to actually understand what it means to be strong. Meaning. Depth. Like,
yes.
And that's what we, in my view, humbly as a society and as a sports society especially, have lost. And we see it in things like the shut up and dribble movement, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, don't talk. Just bounce that ball. But what? No depth, right? So I can show you my strength on a basketball court. I can show you my strength on a football field. I can show you my strength hurtling through the air as a gymnast, but I can't show you my strength with my mind. I can't show you my strength with my spirit or my soul. Nah, bro, you got it twisted. And that's my reality now. And one of the reasons I'm out of this game is to be able to say things like that and to not have to worry, and loudly, and to not have to worry about what my fellow fraternity of coaches here in the great state of Massachusetts necessarily, and I've got some great coaching friends, don't get me wrong, are going to think of me and say of me personally.
Yeah.
I don't care. We don't have the time to sit back and relax as a society, as a people, as human beings in this place and time. And sport is a vehicle for those messages, man, that can save us.
So speaking of these coaches, what I hear you saying is that you got out of coaching because you didn't want to subscribe to the ideas of the group. Because once you become part of the group, you've probably got to ascribe to their, subscribe. I'm sorry, to their
to the culture,
right.
I guess, right?
Exactly. So your
mean,
voice is limited.
Yeah, I got out of coaching for a lot of reasons, man. The first reason was that I loved the 2 hours that I spent, or 2.5 hours on my practice field. I did. I found myself not wanting to do the work that I had been doing and had to do to be a good coach. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I didn't want to be was a bad coach. I can't phone anything in, man. I've never been that dude. And I felt myself start to go there for a lot of reasons. I got sick in 2019 and I had cancer. So I had a cancer fight that I coached through. And then I came out, in 2020 and as a gay man and, started to process what that was going to mean for my life and for my existence. Mm-hmm. I left my teaching job partially because of new opportunities and partially because we were coming out of Mike Brown and George Floyd, and I had been preaching in this place for 15 years, and I was just really tired of white teachers in the teachers' lounge snickering when I left after I was preaching about black bodies being dropped on American streets without consequence by the state. And I just couldn't do that in part anymore, right? So like all of these things were swirling around in me. And at the end of the day, I realized that I had no fucking clue who I was if I wasn't a football coach. And that it was the entirety of my identity. And it happened before I even knew it. And I'm not judging that because I know a lot of men and good men who have given their entire lives to coaching in that sport. And they've helped tens of thousands of kids. And I respect that. For me, I wanted to see another path of existence. I was 39 at the time. And I wanted to see another path. There's a line by Thoreau in Walden where he says something along the lines of, "It was not long before my feet had worn an impressible path down to the waterfront of the pond," and so it is with life that we just wander into these ruts and we just travel them. And I traveled that for 17 years as a coach, and I sacrificed a lot, or I wouldn't even say sacrificed. I chose to ignore a lot and a lot of experience that, people should be able to have in their lives, right? Like, yeah.
So that's interesting that you use the word sacrifice. Okay, so when as a coach and as a mentor, which we've all been coaches, but I think we found that the more we do it, the more we start mentoring the kids.
Facts.
And we're talking about meaning, right? So all these definitions that are given to us. One of the words is sacrifice. You have to sacrifice for what you want. Well, one of the things I try to explain to kids is that going after something you want is not a sacrifice.
Facts.
Okay?
Yeah.
What you have to do is gain clarity on what you want. Because giving up something that's worthless, is never a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Right?
That's it.
So,
that's 100%.
And when I listen to you, we're talking about meaning. So it's the definitions that we ascribe to those words.
Yeah.
Right. So, I just think it's amazing. I'm loving this.
Yeah, man. I love that. I think that's it's just a really strong point, man. I think we've become a society that's just like so mutually exclusive. Like, for example, like I had a kid who came to me and he was really timid. He's like, "Coach, I want to play football." Big dude, lineman, right? I was like, "I want to play football, but I don't know if I can. Like, I'm in the." And he was like ashamed to say. He's like, "I'm in the winter play, and I love drama, and I also want to play football, but I know I have to be at all practices, and also for like drama, I got to be at rehearsal." And I was like, "My man, we'll work it out. Life is not mutually exclusive, and we exist in this place that, you have to either be this thing or the other, and we saw that, honestly, one of the reasons I left too was I had a really bad taste in my mouth after COVID with the level of advocacy that existed for the restarting of athletics that didn't exist in any way, shape, or form for any other extracurricular that was being affected by COVID. there were parents out on street corners like they were protesting segregation to get kids back into hockey rinks, but nobody was doing that for the chess club or the robotics team or band or drama. And like I looked at it and said, man, have we gone far afield with what athletics should be to me. And it's not to say you can't give your life to it because it's dope, but it can't be everything. And if it is everything, any person for whom it is everything, I would advise them humbly to ask themselves why. Because in my instance, it was entirely because I didn't want to confront my lived reality. Now, that might not be true for everybody, but everybody has a reason. Because you don't spend 24 hours a day being that passionate about something to the point that you're willing to sacrifice things that you do like.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Without covering something up. Like, what are you hiding in a sense, right? And like that's, and that was it. It was like, man, especially after I got sick, it was like the scales fell from my eyes and I realized that I almost went out without ever getting the opportunity to be a fully authentic person. You know, like people talk about death and mortality a lot, and they talk about it in very broad and vague terms and philosophical terms. And there's philosophical death, and then there's death. So when you look at your doctor in the face and you say, are you telling me that I might die? And he says, well, it's cancer, so I can't tell you no.
Right. You mean dead?
Yeah, like really dead? Like fucking dead? Like Biggie and Pac dead? Like fuck, man. And you're forced to think about that. Like there's no other way. You got to look at it. You got to. And I asked myself, all right, man, if this is it, if this dude say, you know, I go back for my next round and he say 6 months, am I satisfied? Am I satisfied? And my answer unequivocally was no. So I was like, fuck that. Immediately, it was crazy, man. I was like, fuck that. There's not a chance that I'm going to allow, even if it's 6 months, even if it's a year, even if it's 2 years, even if it's 5 years, and my prognosis is good. So I'm like, let's go. Act 2, same verse, better than the first. Like, there's no way that I'm going to spend another minute living in complete and total fear, just complete repression of self, depression as a result of that. And in the 3 years since I've come out, it's I used to have a dream regularly, a stress dream. When I'd fall asleep, and in my dream I'd be accused of a crime that I didn't commit, and I would go through a trial, and like vividly in my dream, I go through the trial, and then I would get convicted of this crime, and I get sentenced almost every time to 40 years. Right. And the dream always ended getting took back to lockup, getting like the whole fucking process, like loaded in the van, took to state, loaded out, intake, in you go, door closes, and I'm in this cell trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the next 40 years of my life in this fucking dungeon, right, of American retributive justice or whatever, you know. And the dream would always end with me falling asleep on my cot in my cell that first night. And then I would wake up in my bedroom at home in Medford, and I immediately would be like fucking panicked because it's dark, and I feel like I'm still there. And then like ESPN would be on or something. I'd be like, oh, thank God they don't have ESPN.
Right.
Oh my God, right? I haven't had that dream since I came out of the closet.
So
not once. I used to have that dream twice a month.
So when was the moment, because I'm guessing this is what happened, when was the moment where you just said, fuck it? Because with cancer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and then you got to come out. So my experience, my grandmother died in my arms.
Wow.
Okay, so my mom,
Wow.
my mom died in my uncle's arms. So I'm named after my uncle, after the man who my mother, whose arms she died in.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there with my grandmother, and I hear her take her last breath. All right, she's in my arms, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And my grandmother she was full of drama, okay? And I'm thinking to myself, she did this shit on purpose. She wanted to just because this is my baby, you know what, I'm going out with you.
Yep,
right?
yep.
So I go home, and I get home from Europe, and I go and we get her out of the the home where my aunt has put her. And my aunt, who actually also died of cancer, she died of Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yep.
So, and this was a couple of years ago. But anyway, like I said, my grandmother passes away in my arms, and I'm thinking to myself, I wish, because I watched her struggle, and I'm saying to myself, I wish she would hurry up and die.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt bad for saying it, but on this podcast, what we're trying to do is be real about this. Yeah. I've got this feeling that, no, she's got to go.
Yeah, it's time.
Because she is suffering. But that wasn't it. It was that I felt as though that this will be a burden lifted off of me. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what the hell why am I thinking this? But it's real.
Yeah. And
it's real.
And it's acceptable, man. My mom was the primary caregiver for both of her parents on their way out, and I was around her, but I wasn't the primary, but she was like every day, every night, day in and day out. And I loved my grandma and my grandpa a lot. I mean, my grandpa was my dad in a lot of ways, was my real positive male figure in my life. And my grandma is the reason I write as well as I do, because she was a poet and a great one. And it was murdering my mother. And I could just see it eat away. And I wasn't happy for the loss, obviously. But yeah, man, I was really happy that my mom didn't have to do that anymore, and that my grandmother wasn't living a life that she would have spit on. Like, she wouldn't have wanted it. She was active and vibrant and loud and tough and all that shit, right? Yeah.
Yes, I know her already.
You know her, right? And she just didn't want any part of that. Yeah. She would have wanted out. You know what I mean? So we're conditioned to feel guilt connected to loss, especially for us, all of us have this kind of Papa Bear vibe, of protector, and you guys are dads, so that double that, with that sense of protection, and the guilt that you feel is that you're not able to protect somebody in that moment that you love, and it's the acceptance of that reality and of that fact, man, that to me is super freeing in a lot of ways, because I wrote a song a while ago on the back end of an album. It's called One Way Ride, and it's just about that. Dude, this is it. And I used to say to kids, there's no rewind button, man. The only commodity that is constantly reducing is time. You can make more money, you can buy a nice house, you can marry a beautiful person, you can do whatever you want. But you ain't never, you're never gonna find more time. It's always going downhill. So yeah, man, I think that we feel that sense of guilt that we can't protect somebody, that we're unable to give them time. We're unable to give them the gift of life. And it's the one thing we want to give to people more than anything else. And that's the grand irony of being human, Yeah. You're aware of the fact. No other animal in the world has this problem. From the time you're 25 on, you're aware that it's ticking. And you have to be aware of that. Or you're just, I say there, man, I wish I also was completely ignorant of that. It would be super nice to not have to think about that. But also that's given me everything, bro. That mortality and that recognition of my mortality has given me my life and my freedom.
Stephen Covey wrote about that in his book, First Things First.
Yeah, I've read snippets of that.
Right, the clock and the compass. Right, so it sounds like, you found your compass.
Yeah,
right.
Clock and great. Compass. I'm writing that shit down.
Hey, this is Stephen Covey. This wasn't me.
Stephen Covey. Thank you, Stephen.
Shout out.
Because I want to get into your decisions to walk away and coming out and that kind of, I think it feels like finally prioritizing what you realized was important to you, which is being your genuine self and being true to yourself.
Yeah.
What did football mean to you throughout your life before you reached that place? What was your relationship like with the sport?
That's a really tough question, and I've been striving to answer for 5 years, right? In some senses, it was like having a. You want the good or the bad first.
It doesn't matter.
You got to pick. You got to help me out.
Give me the bad.
You want the bad. In some senses, it was like It was like running with a partner doing drugs. Like there was like a codependency addiction behavior. You know, it was like two addicts living in the same space at the same time, like helping each other use in a way, right? And so my relationship with football was so double-edged, because the bad was that it was ridiculously toxic. You know, I probably knew that I was gay. I really knew that I was gay in my early 20s, but I had an idea in my teens, you know, and throughout all of that process, football became my definer of masculinity. It became my beard, because no self-respecting gay man would put himself in this bastion of homophobia, which it absolutely is. Football
Yes.
specifically, but American male sport generally.
Okay.
But there are others that are better at it, you know, at accepting the realities of human existence than football. And there's such a connection of strength and masculinity. So like these were all of my definers. You know, I graduated from high school in 2000. In 1999, Matt Shepard was chained to a Wyoming fence, beaten to death by a couple of rednecks, and left to die. And that was on the front page of every paper. So my inclinations of being gay, you know, were like, well, fuck, being gay means I'm going to get identified and outed. I'm not going to get any of the things that I want in my life, which at the time was the family that I never got to really have in my own life. And then I'm going to get outed and everything's going to come crashing down, or somebody's going to fuck me up or beat me or whatever. And not that I can't defend myself, but who wants that? And football was just kind of this place where like nobody would assume that that was who I was, because why would I be there if that's who I was? You know, and I kind of fell into that more coaching. And then it became this projection of life. So like I call it in the book, I call it Rockwell, like a Rockwell painting. You know, the sense of Americana that I wanted, man, from a sexual orientation standpoint, from a wealth standpoint, from a racial standpoint. I mean, man, like it felt like every piece of who I was insufficient to my country and to my society, but that this thing gave me a pass, right? And like I could go into this place, I could be dominant, I could be the dominant, I could be Stanley Kowalski, I could be the gaudy seed bearer. And I watched men that I emulated and respected and love to this day, you know, demonstrate those behaviors for me as a young man, as a young coach. And I wanted that. I wanted the family running out to greet you at half field after the game was over. I wanted, you know, I wanted that. I wanted that convention. And then I knew I couldn't have it. So that really is the dark side of it, you know, it was this place where I could completely hide myself and cover myself. And then at the same time, the culture of the sport was presenting itself to me in a manner that it was increasing my distaste for myself.
Man, I haven't gone into that much depth in thinking about it like that. But you know, when I think of my own childhood, so you had mentioned the young football player who wanted to participate in the school play.
Yeah.
All right. So I grew up in the Atlantic City Children's Theater.
Cool.
So my heroes at that time were Nikki Giovanni, Paul
Poetical
Lawrence
black
Dunbar.
female.
Yes,
exactly. Man.
Langston Hughes, James Baldwin.
Oh, my favorite.
Okay?
My favorite.
So these are the people. So basketball never meant as much to me as those heroes meant to me. I mean, I could watch Dr. J and Rose Malone, these guys all the time, but they never meant more to me than those figures that I had grew up with. I'm reading their books. I'm reading their biographies, their autobiographies, you know, and I'm watching them develop these stories out of an America that was totally different.
Yeah.
Right. So when I hear you speak about your experiences, you know, a lot of the kids now are, and I'm asking this because, you know, I didn't feel as though. I was always told, no, you got to be hard, you got to be tough, you got to be tough. So I started lifting weights.
Yep.
And I had never wanted to hurt anybody on the basketball field, but when you get out there, and you're playing against guys like Charles Oakley or or somebody like that, right?
Better muscle up.
Right. You've got to protect yourself. And, and for me to stand out, I had to become physically stronger.
Yeah. Yep.
But what lacked was my emotional strength, right? When to actually fight or when to start a fight, when to hold back.
Yep.
I didn't understand how to do that. Everything they asked me to do had to do with physicality.
Yep.
Nothing that I wasn't
Rage.
helped with. Yes, rage. I was never helped with the emotional part of the game.
Football is crazy like that, man. It does prey on traumatic rage.
Yep.
And it's really interesting. So I had a conversation again. This is like a broken record. I'm writing this story, right, and it's been a process, like to go, 20 years back in my life and put myself there. But in the course of doing this, I called up one of, I will call him Richard, right?
Pryor?
No, man, that would be dope. Can I call him? We got some shit to talk about, bro. No, I call Rich up, and Rich is gay. He's from the state of Michigan. He was a highly touted defensive lineman prospect. He's from Detroit white boy. So that is always an interesting vibe. 6'3", 320 pounds, which is brick
man.
shit house. Tattoos up and down, like blah 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 blah. And he came out at 19, right? Because he lost football, because he essentially broke his back, had to have back surgery, lost his scolly, fell into depression and drugs at Michigan State for his first year, came home, got in trouble, blah blah blah. When he talks about sport, he talks about it became this place where my rage could just consume me and take over, and that people trumpeted that. And they triumphed that. And they told me that I was a great football player. And they told me that I was a great hockey player because of it. And then I asked him, well, what were you so mad about? And without missing a beat and without an ounce of pretense, he goes, I knew I was gay, man, and I fucking hated it. So now you think about what it does in somebody's mind to know that you are something, hate it so much that you're angry at the world, at yourself, at your fucking parents, at God, at whoever the fuck it is that put you in this predicament. Not to mention the fact that there are people telling you that you're choosing this shit for yourself, like it's something that you would just create for yourself. And to feel that way about it, to the point that you're so angry that you're good at fucking people up. And then have an authority figure from an educational standpoint say, great job, buddy. I was a decent football player and not good or great by any means, but the only thing that made me decent at it at all was that I was fucking tapped. And I was tapped because I hated my dad and I hated who I was. And that made me good. Is that positive? Is that a positive development in my life? Would I say that athletics positively influenced me? Yeah. Would I say that it handicapped me tremendously as well? Absolutely. And the unwillingness of American sport to even have a fucking conversation about it, really have a conversation about it, is what scares me.
I would say, and you made me think about it, that one of the other things that I didn't talk about, and I never talked about it to you because, to be honest, I was already in a bad place when I had, by the time that training camp had started, and I knew the road that I was going down there, and as sad as it is, I really needed that stipend at that time with illegal stuff. But I had come to the place in my life that year that I was working for you where I had realized at that point how messed up our society, how warped it was around our sport culture, our athletic culture. And I'm someone that loved sports, that playing it
Me too.
was everything. After my own career was over, writing about it, covering, staying connected, and I still see the beauty in sport when I go out there and I shoot it and I'm behind a camera. But we do not prepare our athletes from youth, certainly when they get to high school, college, professionally. We do not prepare them, one, for life after sport.
Yeah, which is
we
a
don't
huge
teach people
problem.
how to turn it off.
Nope.
We don't. They should be spending billions on mental health professionals, on trauma work, for athletes at all levels.
Yep.
Because a lot of the great ones have trauma in their backgrounds, or they become traumatized from
right.
sport. And we don't prepare them for how do you turn it off when you go out into society, because you cannot behave in the everyday world the way you do on a football field or a court. And we also, like, we do not have any sort of ego checks. At every level, talking about from the youth level on, I can still remember clear as day kids that I played Little League or, Pee Wee football or youth league basketball in elementary school, man, that there were people in the community, there were coaches that were telling them, like, you're going to be someone in this sport,
Yep.
Like, I remember the kid that and I'm not. I've told the story to different
as
people.
opposed to being someone at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
Like you're a
Be
great,
that, or how about just be a person, man?
Like you're a great player right now, but they're like you're gonna be a major. Like this kid that was in Little League. He was one of those kids that, like, when he was 11, he was like 5'6", 170 pounds, and he hit like 27 home runs. I still remember in Little League, and like people were like, "Hey, you're gonna be a major leaguer to him."
He's
kid,
5'8" now.
When we were seniors in high school, no joke, he was the same size. He was still 5'7", 170 pounds.
Weird, Sam. It's almost like you're saying that you can't predict future events. Is what you're saying.
Pre-puberty, you can't at all. But like,
Weird.
didn't hit a single home run, and like his identity, I think, was so tied up in sport.
Yeah.
And in that, it's like, I don't know how you deal, and we do that at all levels with these kids, where we're like, you walk on water because you're good at what you do right now, and at some point, either you're not going to be good enough anymore, because the level of eliteness to be able to do that for your profession we're talking about it's 0.00001% of people that you can be phenomenal, amazing high school player, and you never get paid a cent to play that sport as your profession. And even then, on top of it, you have injuries, you have all sorts of stuff that happens.
What next?
And it's like, we do not prepare. We don't have these ego checks for kids to be like, you got to be humble. You have to have things that you want to do outside of the sport. And so by the time I got there to being an assistant with you, I was already really at a man, there's a lot about sport culture that is really, I just cannot fake it anymore.
I mean, I think one of the big pieces too, man, and you're touching on it, is that Americans love to try and act as though sport is this, like,
everything.
Well, that, but also this bubble of release, like, and it's, this is this place where the problems of America don't seep in. I used to have coaches, they tweet it, and they're like, America could take some lessons from a football locker room where everybody works together. And I'm like, for real? Like, we really want to have some conversations.
Have you ever been in a locker
about the conversations that are happening in the football locker room? Because when Mike Brown hit the dirt, the same conversations that were happening on the street were happening downstairs from our coach's office.
Yeah, or you're having in the locker rooms, you're having like a super fragmented, segregated.
So, it's all clicked out.
It's clicked out. You're having, we could learn a lot. How many fist fights have I seen in a locker room between
all of that
people
stuff
over
goes
dumb,
on.
ignorant stuff?
Okay, so now, I mean, that's a serious topic, right?
Yeah, huge.
So if we're going to broach that conversation, and you got to talk about the coaches that are actually in the locker rooms.
Facts.
Yeah.
These motherfuckers don't want to approach the subject.
Yeah.
Why? Because most of them, and I'm guessing, all right? I'm guessing. Please, someone tell me if I'm wrong. But most of them are white coaches.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, well, they're white straight men.
Yes.
Huge problem.
So you don't want to have
especially in football.
Especially in football, right?
Especially in football.
So how do you have that conversation? You were scared to death, all right, to have that conversation against what, a 70% black team?
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to have that conversation.
No.
Nor are you qualified to have that
No,
conversation.
and that's one of the big things. I tweeted the other day, let's normalize not being an expert in everything, right? And it's one of those big things in, like, opinionated expert culture, right? Is that everybody gets to be a fucking expert in everything, you know? And so, like, one of the things that it's crazy, man. I've offered this to a bunch of coaches. Nobody's taken me up on it. Is the opportunity, because, like, I kind of am a professional at talking about diversity and social equity in athletic contexts. So, hey, I'd love to come in and do something with your team during camp. There's not a huge interest in that.
Crickets.
Again, because we have chosen to view sport as an escape from society as opposed to a reflection of it, as opposed to an extension of it, or just society itself.
I agree. Like nobody that is in a position of authority. So one, yes, it is a massive problem, especially football and basketball along racial lines. Baseball too, although it's more baseball along having it's racial, but it's also the lack of Latino coaches in baseball. When you look at such a large when you have such a big percentage of a sport being played by people of a certain racial demographic, and the coaching doesn't reflect that, it is a problem. It is a big problem.
But we could sit here for the next 327 years and dissect that, because that is the functionality of America from an economic, social, and political standpoint. There's that kind of meme that's been circulating that's like, when corporations talk about diversity, this is what they mean. And it's like a white man, 2 white men, 3 white men, 2 white ladies, 3 white men. And then the last row of management, lower management, we've got some black faces, black women, brown faces, gays, whatever.
And what I was kind of getting at there is that, but even the people at the top that are not, they just want to insulate themselves. They don't want to even get help better understanding something. So my wife, my wife she's a therapist. She's done it for a really long time. She specializes in trauma and consent and stuff like that, and doing trauma work, working with survivors. And I've reached out because I have a lot of contacts, people that I considered friends, people I think are friends, that you reach out in the college coaching ranks of, look, my wife is a very dynamic, compelling, engaging, funny presenter and extremely knowledgeable on this. Where she's starting to put together for her practice, she's putting together these in-services about things like consent, about things like healthy relationships, because a lot of people don't understand consent, and this is a topic to explore. I want to get my wife on the podcast, as it might be whatever, but things like
just listening.
Things like consent are so important for high schools, for colleges, athletes, both male and female, to understand that that things are not that just because it isn't someone grabbing a stranger off the street and whatever, that doesn't mean that something going on is consensual. And there are big problems. There's lots of schools. The University of Vermont has a huge issue going on with all these protests up there and accusations about the school in general, but with the athletic department, different teams specific. There was Title IX lawsuit. And just using that as an example, it's a problem across athletics. And we're saying, like, you guys, you have to do in-services anyways. They do the same generic ones. This is someone that could actually relate to your kids, can resonate. And it's like crickets in response, because no one wants to change these problems. They just want to kick the can down the road till they can retire and have it someone else's problem. No one actually wants to be like, hey, maybe we can actually curtail sexual violence among our student athletes.
And in addition to that, man, and this is something else that I wrote in an article years ago that was called 6 Years to George Floyd. That's about the 6 years between Mike Brown and George Floyd's death.
6. Number of creation. Gotcha.
There it is. Threes and sixes.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm with you. Tesla numbers and shit. That's my conspiracy theory friend got me into that stuff. No. And I totally lost my train of thought. I got on the 6. 6 years to George Floyd. And like, I came to this kind of realization, and like, we're a reactive society, So like, something happens, things get hot, Twitter and social media goes off for 3 weeks, and then it's gone. And I kind of came to this realization about why white America wasn't as disgusted by the extrajudicial murder of black men by agents of the state under the banner of the Constitution, which is what's happening, right? Or what was happening and is happening and continues to happen and has always happened in this country. And I was like, why are they not incensed about this at all? It's insulting to the Constitution. It's insulting to the flag. It's insulting to America. And the reason is that it doesn't affect their day-to-day life.
That's right.
Right? It's not somebody who looks like their family dead on the street, left there for a community to see over and over and over again. And you can, a time to kill it, right? Like, close your eyes. Now imagine that body is white. Now imagine it's a little white boy that got shot on the Cleveland playground because he had a toy gun. And imagine what America's response to that white boy being shot for having a toy gun, right? there would be the Second Amendment. People would be up. White.
That's exactly.
But that's the reactiveness, and the reactiveness exists in the notion that this is the other. This is something that doesn't affect me. I don't have to live with it. I don't have to see it. It has been the balm, the salve of white America's collective moneyed guilt. And white people often get especially my friends, get very angry at me when I speak about white people or straight people as a monolith. And they're like, we're not all the same.
Yeah, we're not all the same.
I'm like, I get it, man. I ain't speaking to you specifically. Like, man, like the fragility of even having the conversation. Yeah. And that goes in some senses for straight men as well, right? Is like, man, the fragility of even having these conversations. It's like my very fucking existence and the fact that I have thoughts and words somehow takes away from your agency, man. Power is not pie. Mm-hmm. We need to stop acting like it is, because as long as we're acting like it is, man, as long as we're acting like it is, we will always war, right? And that's it.
I mean, you just using that example of these people, black and brown people being killed by the state for things that are not punishable by death, and that the state does not
without trial.
That does not have. It's not supposed to, by law, have that authority to, like, oh, you're looking suspicious. Oh, you have a BB gun on the playground. We're not even going to give you a warning.
Can I just interject? I'm sorry. Can I also interject that the same people who are saying that are the same people who are also advocating to stockpile weapons to protect against the tyrannical government?
That's what I was getting at. Is that the demographic? It's to me what's crazy is the demographic that is largely white conservative that is, on one hand, every time a black or brown person is killed, even when they're unarmed, when they're complying, when they're everything. They said nothing on the guy in Minnesota. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name.
Philando Castile.
Yes, Philando Castile, who was a legal licensed gun owner who told the police officer, "I'm armed. I'm armed," because and he was getting his wallet and he gets killed. And they're once again not convicted. The police officer.
Nope.
No, crickets about that. A legal gun owner who is licensed and is shot for nothing. And every time that a black or brown, the kid in Cleveland who had a BB gun, who they didn't even give a warning to, and Tamir Rice, the police report totally filled with lies. When you look up the video, the amount of time they said we gave him a warning, and it's nothing, or it's you just should have complied.
I mean, it's the broad question too, right? Like, these things are happening now and we're getting far afield in the topic of racial justice, but these things are happening now with the power of the citizen journalist. And what I say to it, so I do in-services sometimes for schools on the issue of race, and my specific talk is on the notion of white complicity, which is that in order for America to address its issue with race, specifically with race, white America has to own, including good white people, that they are complicit, right? America wants truth and reconciliation without telling the truth. Mm-hmm. It doesn't want to own. Doesn't want accountability, and we're coaches. The first step to owning to progression and growth is accountability of reality, right? And so, like, we're having these conversations about what it is that people can do in order to make moves in the right direction, man. And it starts with an acceptance that this is not a broken system. This is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. So that's the first thing I want to say.
If I was Christian, I would say amen.
Amen. Say it anyway. And B, that the specific of, I get into this a lot, the specific of the murder of citizens by the cops with guns is but one piece. One tiny piece. Mm-hmm. We're not even talking about plea arrangements. We're not even talking about, if you're a black man, you're more likely to be stopped. You're more likely to be searched when you're stopped. You're more likely to be removed from your vehicle when you're stopped. You're more likely to be cuffed when you're stopped. You're more likely to be physically assaulted when you're stopped. You're more likely to be detained when you're stopped. If you're detained, you're more likely to be detained for longer than a white person detained for the same crime. You're more likely to be charged. If charged, you're more likely to receive a higher bail or no bail. You're more likely to be convicted, and when convicted, your sentences are 20% longer than white people convicted of the same crimes. Then you serve on average over 20% longer of your sentences before parole, more likely to be rejected by first parole, and less likely to be employed 5 years after your release, more likely to be back in jail. by ridiculous percentages. So if we really want to have this conversation about whether or not this thing actually fucking exists, which for some reason we're still talking about, like it's a debate, I don't understand. Every single number and measurable about American society tells us that American society is racist, it is systemically racist, and it has been systemically racist for hundreds of years. That's like me being like, oh, I have these 2 tumors in my neck, but they're not there.
That's so a couple of things. One, and it starts at the school level, and you see it when you're teaching, and to me, it's crazy where every statistic shows us that at a minimum, black and white kids, youth, minors, we'll say, use drugs at the same rate. Anecdotally, white kids use them much more. You see it in the suburbs. More
money, more drugs.
Growing up,
right?
I grew up in
more money, more drugs.
I grew up in a city, a very racially mixed city. My high school was huge, and it was very, very racially mixed. It was like 35% white, 40% black, and then the rest was other racial demographics. And all the kids that I knew that were the drug users, overwhelmingly white. The kids that were arrested for drugs were all black. I never knew a white kid that was arrested for drugs growing up. And we see it in arrest rates that bare minimum white youth and black youth use drugs at the same rate. It's really probably significantly more. But black youth are the ones that are arrested at insanely higher rates. And once you get in the system as a kid, it's over. It's over. And so we don't even want to acknowledge that. And then when you talked about...
We're not rehabilitated. We're not about it.
About American society being, I can never understand. Like, it blows my mind, and I can't even at this point have a conversation where if people are like, America was founded on racism, and people are like, no, it wasn't. How do you say it wasn't when at the country's founding... slavery, race-based slavery, not only existed, but it was the cornerstone of the economy. And that, how do you say it wasn't founded on racism when every law on the books specified that black people were not humans?
Let's add to that.
The color of law.
The color of law. Let's add to that also that the Constitution of the United States of America, at the time of its writing, in the body of the Constitution, ascribed black, they put a number to what black life was worth in comparison to white life, and that number was 3/5.
Yeah, 3/5.
Right? Yep. That for the purposes of representation, black citizens will count as 3/5 of a white man.
So how do you have that and then have the ignorance and audacity to claim that America wasn't founded on racism?
Because it is an inability to translate societal realities and to separate them from individual realities. So, I have this conversation a lot, obviously lots of people have, about privilege, and like these conceptions of white privilege and why it is that we even have to have a conception. Like, for me, it's not hard. Like, I'm a dude. I have a penis as a result of being a dude, although I want to be really, really clear that trans identity is a thing and that trans people and trans rights in America is a fucking issue. I've found and met a lot of people in the trans community in the last 4 or 5 years. I've learned so much, and I have so much more to learn about trans identity. But, and it's not hard for me to say, like, I have a penis. I identify as like a cis presenting man. And as a result of that, like, I receive a number of fucking benefits. Like, for example, when I leave a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, I am not worried. I'm not looking at where the nearest blue phone is. I had a client of mine, a female client, tell me when we were still working out of Boston, she goes, something, we were talking about this, and she goes, another example, maybe in like a 3/4 mile radius, I know every good bathroom that I can go to, like, take care of myself, that I need, should I need to, right? And, but I don't know that because I can just go find an alleyway and piss. Right. And like, that is the definition of privilege. There are a lot of things in my life that have made it fucking hard. And it's been a hard life. I'm lucky to be here, sitting here with y'all and talking, and that's a fucking fact. It wasn't always a foregone conclusion. But one thing that hasn't made my life harder is my penis.
Is being a dude, yeah.
That has made my life easier in American society. Hands down. Right? It's not fucking hard.
Right.
But it's the inability of people to separate the social realities from these individual realities, and what they choose to hear, and this is a choice, is you're telling me that my life wasn't hard. You're telling me that my struggles aren't real, that they don't amount to anything, and that's not at all what anybody is saying to anybody. We're just saying that those struggles were not magnified by this thing, whether it's being black, being gay, being a woman, being trans, being Asian, being Latino. It's okay to say that. And white, straight men, I'm sorry that you fall into a demographic where nothing about who you are from a racial, ethnic, or sexual identity standpoint makes your life difficult. But there are lots of other things in America that make your life hard.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that when I was like in high school, I didn't get. I would probably. I mean, I don't think that the term white privilege even existed when I was in high school, but I would have a hard time with that. Like, well, what do you're saying that white people don't struggle? But now I totally get it. Look, I've been through a lot. I've buried an awful lot of people. I dealt with a life-threatening illness. I went through, all kinds of stuff that was very difficult, but none of those difficulties and struggles and financial hardships or poverty or anything was because I was white or was a guy. Now, being white and being a guy didn't protect me from other things.
Nope.
So no one's saying that.
It's not a magic armor.
But it's not. But
Although
they didn't cause those things, and that's something that people really struggle with.
It's just hard, man. It's hard to. I think it's just really, really hard, and it goes back to something that Bobby was talking about, and Sam, you too, in sport, which was notions of humility, and that's really a big issue, especially as we individualize more and more. Like, we have always been a society that was founded on the rights of the individual, right? From the principles of liberalism and liberal democracy. That's what matters, and that's important. And as we've grown over 300 almost years, American society has become increasingly about the individual in government representation, sure, but just in like cultural society. And so, this thing tells me that I'm important constantly. And I get little dopamine hits when somebody likes my Instagram post, right? And like
true dope fiends.
True dope fiends. Definition. And that makes it murders empathy.
It does.
It destroys the ability to see interconnectivity between life. And you stay in your box, and you stay in yours, and I'll stay the fuck in mine. And don't you come in here unless we're exactly the same, and your box looks exactly like my box.
So that's one of the issues in sports, right? If we bring this,
let's bring it back.
Sports. So now you are presenting kids a culture, a culture that's not real. All right, it's relevant, but it's not real because there's so much more behind the scenes, right? So what do the kids do? They end up spending more time enamored with the bright lights and the bling and everything else with the ball is life shit, right? Yep. Ball ain't life. Life is life.
Life is life.
So instead of figuring out and what they're doing, they're being subjected to the culture of the lights, and they fail, right? They can go their entire lives without figuring out and admiring the light within themselves.
Yeah.
So, dude, like you said, this is working the exact way it's supposed to work. Yeah. So if we're going to have conversations with young adults and children, then you know what? They are much more resourceful than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Have the fucking conversation.
I'm with that, man. Like, I say all the time, the youth is the truth, and like, it is in a lot of places. It's adults who are unwilling to have the conversation, who are carrying over that reluctance from generations past. This is some shit we don't talk about. And just for the record, like the 90s fucked us over with that. Me and Sam are children of this generation where we're the Benetton generation. We're the generation where, like, look, Martin Luther King fought for racism, and then he was shot, and then Malcolm X was shot, and then the Civil Rights Bill was signed, and Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus. And look, racism is over. Yeah. And look at all of us loving hip-hop and wearing dashikis and shit, and we're holding hands. Literally, this was the fucking 90s. Like, and look,
or me wearing Boss jeans.
Will Smith is on TV. How can racism be a thing? There's the Fresh Prince. Sam's wearing Boss, bro. Like, racism is dead. And we got inundated with that. Now that generation is 40 years old, and the resurgence of neoconservatism and white pride and power, right? This notion of reclaiming white identity that's being taken from them somehow mysteriously. I still don't understand how that's possible, right? That is a product of that generation, both as a backlash and on our side. We relaxed.
Yeah. We just we're like, oh, it's over. It's dead.
Over.
When you talked about identity, it's interesting because I think about my own. Because I think back on my playing career a lot, but I don't think about higher level stuff. I'll think about high school. I'll think about, and I think back very fondly on that time in my life. But then there was a long time after when I was still an athlete, but I was like an empty shell. My best friend had taken his life. My dad had gotten killed. And I was just lost and lost in depression and sad and just a fog. And I still, for years and years and years, was an athlete. But when that came to an end, like, it took me a very long time to figure out my identity, because that was all that I identified as up until, even when I was miserable playing, I still identified as an athlete. And it took me a very long time to start figuring out who the hell I was afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, so to go deeper into this conversation, because we're talking to young athletes, we may be talking to people who haven't figured out who they are yet. And that's a very long process. It's a lifetime to figure out who you actually are, right? Because it constantly changes.
Yes.
Can we just double on that real quick?
Please, yes.
No, very quickly. That like I that was one of the dopest things you said today, because like we have this notion like at 18 you're supposed to have it figured all out.
No, God, no.
Exactly.
Like, what the fuck? I was a dummy at 18. Please.
So it leads me to say, well, when I was growing up, I believe the children are the future. Teach them well, let them with it. Bullshit. They don't know shit. You don't know anything. So it's up to individuals who actually sit down and think about the consequences of actions to try their best to sit down and relay our thoughts with the youth, right? Yeah. But what I want to say is if we're talking about identity, we're born into identities, right? Yeah. I'm Jewish, right? So what? And that's always been a problem of mine. I'm like, wait a minute, because what I hear when I hear Jewish is, okay, well, they're the chosen people, and I'm like, wait a minute. What kind of God is what? I'm already being segregated away from that.
They're the unchosen?
Right. So I'm the unchosen, right? The Greys from Game of Thrones, right?
Yep, the Greys.
I'm like, what is this? What kind of God is going to separate me from this? I don't know. Or I grew up in a Catholic school. I attended Catholic school, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm not Catholic, I'm not this. I'm not worthy of this. Or I'm born a sinner.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. So now I'm getting all these identities, and I was raised in a Baptist church, so we've got our own way of thinking, right? And then I'm like, no, stop, no more. You will not identify me as that. I don't care if what tribe of Israel you're from. I don't care about what denomination of Christianity you're from. If me and you get along, we good.
Along. Yep.
Yeah. We are good. I don't care if you're black, white, gay. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Like The Rock would say, it doesn't matter, right? So I'm with that.
I feel you, man. I mean, my line is at this point, I think, is like kind of similar to that. I'm a little bit more binary, I think, to a degree, where I'm like, look, man, you either ride for human rights or you don't. Mm-hmm. I don't have necessarily a lot of time left in my life to be patient with people who don't ride for human rights, because I spent a lot of time being patient with those people and even being submissive to those people.
Yes.
And for me right now, I don't know how much I'm going to be here, but for the time that I'm here, I'm going to speak that reality for me as best as I know, and so. Yeah, I mean, I think that we just pigeonhole people into identity conceptions, and we're unwilling to challenge those identity conceptions, and we ask people to make decisions about identity conceptions, like the implications of your identifications are evident to you so early. Mm-hmm. Like we look at things like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, and now these other states that are, packing in like kids are too young to learn about sexuality. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like all the way up through my formative childhood, heteronormativity and heteronormalization was a thing. There was literally, I write about it, like every football coach I had said this. Yes. This game makes good fathers and it makes good husbands.
I have no
good leaders, right? Good fathers, good husbands, good leaders. And then when I became a coach, I said that same shit, because it had been said to me for years. And the heteronormativity was rife with that. It wasn't, you're going to be a great father with another dude. That wasn't in the conception. And this is like, if we get to a segment of reading, and this is the important thing, because I have to confront this as a human being, that I trumpeted the same heteronormativity that restricted my own understanding of self and peace with self, and somewhere in that sea of thousands of kids that I saw and sat in front of me in a locker room was another little gay kid trying to figure it all out, and I did the same fucking thing to him that got done to me, and I have to reconcile that, and that is the strength of this. That's what I want people to grip and understand. I knew I was gay. I was hard in the closet. I was in a long-distance relationship with a dude throughout the entirety of my head coaching career. These were real things. I was actively gay while saying those things in that environment. I am smart. I am capable. I'm proud of myself generally, all that stuff. So, like, what the fuck?
So, okay, so I want to ask the question, and because I think it should be asked, all right? You don't speak for all gay men.
No.
Right?
No.
I don't speak for what would be considered a heterosexual man. I don't speak
No.
for all black men.
No.
Okay? My question is, if I'm speaking to my kids, one thing I've learned is look first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah.
Okay? So if we're talking about locker rooms with a masculine energy, all right, because that's what the sport,
'cause that's
sport
the thing.
teaches, right? If I look at the WNBA, all right, I see a lot of talented basketball players out there, right?
Yep.
And one of the reasons I don't think the WNBA actually takes off the way it could is because there is a gay stamp on it,
Yep.
right? They don't want that. Corporate media doesn't want that, all right?
Not unless it's June.
Not right, exactly. Not unless it's June, exactly.
For the record, when I set this up with you, I had forgotten it.
Sure, Sam.
Right.
We'll give you the benefit of the doubt, big homie.
So now, why don't we have coaches out here who can sit down and have, because I'm sure there are gay young men, gay young women, trans, whatever, of both genders, or I don't know how many genders there are now, but whatever that is, why can't you sit down and have the conversation? Why is that not part of the curriculum? I'm not, especially in a locker room. Okay?
Yeah.
Because if I hear, I've gotten to the point now where I can listen to a black joke and laugh.
Yeah.
Okay? But can a gay man listen to a gay joke and laugh?
Sure.
Okay, so if we get that, because here's I'm coming from this.
But
right?
but I will say that, and I feel this way about a lot of humor as well, that like it has to be intelligence. The joke can't be your very existence, and this is my problem with Chappelle. Mm-hmm. And I loved Dave Chappelle. I memorized his whole first stand-up, Killing Him Softly. I can literally still recite it.
Okay.
I loved Dave.
All right.
But I can't watch him now because his joke is, look, a tranny. Mm-hmm. And that's not a joke.
No, please explain.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's not a joke. Mm-hmm. You can make a joke about, like, gay men and iced coffee or, fucking, like, lifestyle, like, idiosyncrasies about what it means to be gay in America, what it means to be black in America, and about the experience.
Okay.
That's trumpeting.
But it's not just like, hey, there's a gay guy, let's laugh at
that's
him.
trumpeting.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
trumpeting
Right.
humanity in a comedic way. It's bringing the realities of existence out to the forefront in a comic way and forcing people to confront them. And that's the beauty of comedy. And I can listen to a black joke or a gay joke that does that.
Okay.
But I can't listen to that motherfucker being like, look at that he, she. And the fact that they're there is funny. And I'm going to misgender them. And I'm going to fucking just point like their very existence is the joke. I can't vibe with that. I can't anymore.
You said something, and it struck a chord with me a little while ago, and it's one. I'll preface this. I can't imagine, number one, what it would be like to be just a black kid in a locker room in a predominantly white town, be on a football team, or
It's not fun.
I really can't imagine being a gay kid. For me, I was a white straight kid, and I was very athletic for a while. Now I'm fat and not athletic, and my son beats me up, and I'm in genuine pain afterwards, and he's 5. And the 1-year-old now is beginning to hurt me as well.
Nice,
So
I like
it's
Fatherhood.
I'm well aware of my now athletic limitations, but at one point in life I was very athletic. I was immensely uncomfortable in the locker room by the time I got to high school, being my genuine self, because so in football we had a predominantly black locker room. But that's not the same as a white kid in a predominantly black locker room as being a black kid in a predominantly white locker room. No one made me feel like I didn't belong there. I was always embraced. I was always, you make some jokes here or there, but they were lighthearted, they were whatever. But I didn't feel, at heart, I was a nerdy kid who was into nerdy things. and I loved animals. I wanted to be a marine biologist. I had a conversation with my son the other day because my son wants to be a scientist.
Love it.
Jack, the oldest, wants to be a scientist and loves animals. And we were talking about being a marine biologist, and I was talking about how, I originally went to college to be a marine biologist, and he was like, well, why didn't you? And I didn't know how to explain
From the mouths of babes.
I didn't know how to
Right.
explain the answer to him because of how important sport was to me. I didn't feel comfortable fully embracing how my nerdy side that loved learning about animals and going out and walking around in wetlands and catching things and studying them and watching friggin' Star Trek as my dirty pleasure that I wouldn't tell anyone about. And,
Are you kidding me?
And,
No.
and,
Seriously?
and I felt like I had to hide all of that from this big part of my life of sport. So I can't imagine, because that doesn't compare one iota to what it must be like to have been a gay kid in a football locker room.
Yeah. I mean, I think I didn't play as long as you guys, right? So I didn't have the added burden in a sense of being an adult trying to find their way through sport.
Mm-hmm.
My entire experience with sport as a player was up to 19, right? So I never had that of being a grown ass human, making a living or, even collegiately, really. By the time you're a senior, you're what, 21,
Yeah.
you're 22.
Right.
You're an adult, sort of.
Yeah, right.
And so in high school, I was very similar to you in a sense of except I was not as talented athletically. And I would say I knew that I was different from this environment, right? That's what I knew then. Biologically, I was really trying to figure stuff out. I just figured that I was kind of nerdy and anxious and not great at sex, and sex is a big part of high school. These kids are coming in the locker room, and I was prepping, so, dorm room, and they're talking about, this and that.
Yeah.
And I felt the pressure there of I maybe didn't get it all the way, but I certainly knew that sex was something important, not just biologically, that it was something important from a social perspective, and that I needed it in order to be seen as an equal worthy of respect. And then there was the added confusion of why is something that is supposed to be biologically so simple for everybody else that I'm
Biologically
interacting
simple.
with, right?
It's an oxymoron, right?
Yep. But it's supposed to be easy,
Yeah.
right? You have sex, and it maybe will be awkward. It might be weird. You might not be any good at it when you're doing it for the first time, right? But the act of it, physically, what you need to do, made sense, right? But it didn't to me. So I would get super anxious. It was, even then, women weren't turning me on biologically. But something that was biologically simple for everybody else, at least in my mind, was not biologically simple for me. So then I felt a great sense of shame and pressure to overcome that. So I kind of tell myself, oh, this is just something that you're struggling with right now because you're 17 and you're awkward, man. Keep trying. It'll get better like anything else, right? Literally, that's what I'm saying. And so, for 10 years, almost 15 years, I dated women. That's a whole other story, including long and established relationships as well that got close to seriousness, y'all's seriousness, you know what I mean? And those things are realities too. So that was high school. When I got out of college, and I wanted to be a coach because they were everything that I wanted to be at that point in my life from a masculinity standpoint. All of my coaches, man, I saw them as so strong and so dude-like, and they seemed so confident, and they always were boisterous and booming, and they never seemed to not have an answer to things, and they just were in control of everything, and people respected them. And then when they walked into the cafeteria, people say, well, how you doing, Coach Jaluka? How you doing, Coach so-and-so? And everybody in the community would know who they were. And I was like, fuck, that's cool. I really want that. And then at the same time, I realized that almost this was going to be what scared me straight. That's really fucked up to say out loud. That this environment was what was going to take me and solve this problem. Because back then, I still saw it as a problem. I did. I was like, this isn't going to be my life. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have 4 kids. I'm going to have a nice house and a nice career. And I'm going to be a coach for 30 years. And people are going to know me as Coach Q. And this is what my life is going to be. And I decided that like when I was like 25, you know, and then it just kind of kept building and building and building. And then you realize as you listen to these implicit quiet things that people say and explicit things that people say, that like who you are as a person, because by 24 I knew who the fuck I was, right. Like they don't value you.
Yeah.
Like, and then when I became a head coach, it doubled down again, because now my leadership and my strength has to be the mantle for all of these other people to follow. And by my estimation, their willingness to follow that mantle was directly connected to whether or not they viewed me as a straight man. And I imagine that that is a fear that every gay man in football has. If these people know that I am queer, are they still going to respect me in this game? Right. And it's what presents this notion to football players and coaches that you have to choose between the two. Right? You can either be queer or you can be a baller.
Wow.
And that to me was murderous, you know, and I dove myself into football. I didn't interact with people. I isolated myself. I wasn't a good son in that period. I wasn't a good friend, family member in any way, shape, or form. I receded almost wholly into my cave, and all I did was work on ball. And all I did was work on football. And I just did that and did that and did that and did that and did that. And then, and then my boyfriend was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So the perception.
And I was like, I didn't know what to do.
Didn't know what to do, yeah.
You know, I mean, I really didn't know what to do. I was like, I really want this. Like, I want us to be together. We've been together at this point for 5-6 years. Like, I love you, but... you know, I'm still scared and I'm still anxious and da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, well, I fucking want things, man. So, like, you know, we're already doing this shit long distance and it's hard enough. And, like, I fucking want things. And, you know, I get it. But, like, also, like, you know, he played at University of Nebraska, you know, like, or shit like that. You know, it was like, come the fuck on. And so there was that. And, so then we broke up. I super receded. And I realized, like, what was actually pulling underneath me was just massive amounts of depression, and then I entered this.
Depressed because you didn't come out the way you wanted to.
No, I think I wasn't even out by then. Okay. I was just I think depressed because I was depressed because I hated who I was and I didn't want to be it. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to say that, but I think that there are a lot of people who know what that feels like, and I really again want to be clear that I don't speak for all gay people or queer people. My heroes are the kids who I grew up with who didn't have the option or the opportunity to hide themselves behind conventional masculinity. I had that option and I took it. So part of me was a hatred of self. Part of it was shame that I took that option, that I let that fear make me a coward, you know, in that realm of my life, that I was preaching authenticity and accountability and strength of self to people directly, influencing their lives, and I didn't even have the strength to put it into my own life.
To thine own self be true.
Yeah. And I was so ashamed of all of that, and then I just kind of decided I didn't want to be here, and I started thinking about that. Just how much easier would it all be? I wouldn't have to worry about coming out. I wouldn't have to worry about anybody calling me a faggot or anything like that. I wouldn't have to worry about all my coaching friends, all the kids that I coached, snickering somewhere in a college dorm room about how Coach Q is queer now or whatever, you know. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. And, that was the darkest time, was right before cancer, was a lot of suicidal ideation, a lot of preparation. It's really weird to talk about that, but, actually setting it up. And like, and football was a part of that. It was like, I feel like we've talked a lot of shit about ball, but it was like, it was an enabler in a sense, and like, before I knew it, I just lost every ounce of self-determination to this thing.
I've got a quote for you. I want to hear your thoughts on this quote. This reminds me of the quote. Okay. This is by Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh, you
All
got
right.
me. Gonzo journalism. I like it already. It's like my hero. All other than James Baldwin.
Gotcha. That's right. For every moment of triumph, for every instance of beauty, many souls must be trampled. Yeah. Thoughts?
I think that Hunter, you should read it again. Let me hear it one more time.
Sure. For every moment of triumph, for every instance of beauty, many souls must be trampled.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, that's the story of humanity and of burning and rebirth and growth and the phoenix rising. And I do subscribe to that. It speaks, man, I can't believe I didn't recognize that right out the gate. I'm kind of mad at myself.
That's why we're here. We're having a conversation.
It is. No, man, I mean, I think it kind of speaks sometimes to like people ask me about like regret. And if I were to look at you in the face and say that I don't have regret, I'd be a liar. I didn't get to date. I didn't get to have my first relationship. I didn't get to move in with anybody. I didn't experience that. You know, even the stuff that I was doing with women was so anxiety producing that I was literally, it's like memorizing lines. You know, it's like you can't really have fun while you're performing a play because you're like in it. I lost 17 years, 2 decades, man, that I denied myself authenticity in life consciously. And every single time I talk about that, it fucks me up because I can't do anything about it. And the one thing I want to do is do something about that. Like, you've got a time machine in this podcast room, we could talk about it.
Yeah.
But when people ask me, do I regret it? Do I regret my life, my choices? I don't. Not,
do you have
not one.
A date where you came out? Do you remember that date as something special?
Yeah. It happened in stages.
Okay.
I came out to my mom on Christmas night, or actually the morning of the 26th, because it was like 1 a.m. and we had like Christmas dinner up there, and all the guests had left. It was just me and Ma. She asked me something about some girl that I was supposedly dating or something, and I had been lying to her for years, and I just said it. So, Ma, I'm gay.
December 26th.
December 26th was to my mom.
All right.
Who responded, well, I already knew that. And I said, the fuck you did, Ma. And then I was like, I need to leave. I'm going to go for a drive for a second. I took off in my truck and I drove like, a mile down the road and like calmed myself down and came back. And because I was it was a big moment. It was the first person that, other than my ex and Rich, who I told you about, who I expressed this to. And then I knew I was going to start coming out, but I didn't really know how to do that. And then I got sick. And then I realized that there was nobody to, so I got cancer and they had to open my neck up, right? That from the base of my ear to my Adam's apple. And it was about 5 hours on the table. And, it's a big surgery. So, and I realized that I didn't have anybody to call my dude, even though we're broken up, we were still talking. I didn't have anybody to call him or the guy I was messing around with at the time, and tell them that I was okay, that I was awake, that I was still here. There wasn't anybody to do that because nobody knew that I was gay except for my mom, who was already freaking out that her baby was going to be under the knife for 5 hours. So like I didn't, and it was cancer, and like I didn't want her to have that added burden of having to call my ex-boyfriend, and tell him that I was okay. And so I came out to one of my best friend and his wife, and his wife was first because I wasn't sure that I was so scared, man, that like my best friend was it was so irrational. And then I think about it, I was so scared that anybody who was a man was going to be like, fuck him, and just walk away from me. Like I was convinced that it was this, like, as soon as I dropped this, everybody was just going to see me as distasteful and they were going to walk away, and So then I did that so that she could call him and let him know I was okay. And then I got through that. I got through the season. 2019, we headed into 2020. We got caught up in COVID. Didn't go that fall, right? The fall of 2020, and it was the spring of through COVID, I started coming out to my inner circle, like people who were tight, people who were my friends. You know, one of my best friends, Anna Rodriguez, who's a public defender out of Haverhill. She's who I'm going to try to get on a podcast with. She's great. You know, and her line, because I dated one of her mentors essentially back in the day, like, and everybody thought we were going to get married, and her first line was, "Wow, so you're not an asshole, you're just gay." Like, she literally said, she's like, "I always thought you were a dick," for how that went down. So like,
there's some correlation.
Yeah, right. No, because like I had treated my ex-girlfriend at that time really poorly. Like, I got scared and run away. I dropped her, you know, like a bad habit for no reason, you know, at all, other than the fact that I was queer and scared. And so like there was that process. And then in the spring of 2021, sorry, this is dragging on. We had the COVID fall, the bridge season there that we played. So we played in like April.
Yep.
That was when I pretty quickly realized that I really didn't want to do this anymore. That I wasn't happy. I didn't have the same spark because I did have that spark. I want to be really clear. Like, I loved coaching, and I do also love ball. Like, it's not mutually exclusive. All the shit that we talked about it, like, there's also something super special about it, right? So like, but I decided that I didn't want to do this anymore. So, but I did want to experience what it was going to be like being on a football field with at least my two number one sort of assistants knowing. So I came out to Dave and to Bobby. Dave was my DC, and I'd known Bobby since he was 10. So like, you know,
So you weren't comfortable with Sam?
He wasn't
there,
Oh.
but no. No. And so like I came out to the two of them so that I could know what it was like to have 3 or 4 weeks on a football field with my brothers and them know who it was. And they looked at me, and those were two guys who helped me through cancer.
Yeah, they're like, "Fuck you, we're gonna joke."
Yep. Right. And they looked at me, and we all laughed. And Bobby and Dave, or I can't remember which one said it, and they just said, "It's really cool that you get to be you," or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
And like, so we did that.
Wow.
And then I quit. I retired, right? As I say, I retired at 40 from something. It was always my goal was to retire from 40 at something. I just didn't want it to be from the job that paid me like $10,000 a year. You know, but
That's cool.
I left. And then that, it was probably the spring of 2021. Pretty soon after that, I posted on Facebook, and at the time I was pretty active and blogging and writing, and so there was a lot of response, and I made a big post, you know, coming out publicly, and that was a decision too. You know, like I thought about like, is that something that I want to do? I also thought, you know, there's not an out high school head football coach in America, not one.
Okay.
I had reached out to a basketball coach years ago, beginning of my coaching career. His name was Anthony, from the New York area. He's a gay male high school basketball coach and a very successful one. And we had exchanged me under a pseudonym, Coach X, right? Yeah. And because I was so afraid, like that's the level of fear that I wouldn't even have a conversation under my real name with another gay man who was in athletics and coaching about what that experience was like. So like, you know what I mean? Like the level of wall. So it was like chipping at a piece of it, a piece of it, a piece of it, a piece of it. But what opened the floodgate was mortality. And so then that was it. I came out, and it's been interesting.
Have you? Because I remember we had reconnected, and I don't remember exactly. It was before your Facebook post, because you told me when we were talking on the phone.
I came out to you on the phone.
Yep. And I remember the Facebook post and hundreds of responses to it. Have you gotten any? Did you get any, or it make its way to you, negativity from former players or parents or anything?
No, not like that. I often say, like, in America and especially up here, that's not how bigotry works.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna. What are they gonna say to my face out
Yeah.
of that? But what I will say is that I said this about my Facebook post. You know, at the time there were like 2,200 followers of that post. You would assume that maybe 600 of them aren't actively on Facebook.
Yeah.
So remove that from the pool. That takes you to 1,600. Probably 200 or so people scrolled it and missed it.
Yeah.
So that takes you to 1,400.
Yeah.
But if you see that post, you interact with it.
Yeah.
So it earned about, 1,000 likes or whatever.
Yeah.
Or reactions, loves,
Yeah.
hugs, emojis, whatever the fuck else we use to tell people that we care about them now through the digital universe. But there were, there's a gap there. Like 300, 400 people who scrolled past that, saw it, read it,
didn't interact
and
with it.
didn't interact with it. And that, to me, like, you don't have to like it to prove that you're not a bigot.
Yep.
But the fact that you didn't like that and you know me is saying something. I also had a young brother out in California who we were working with who I had really negative interactions with, not necessarily about the gay, because he had disowned his own brother after his brother had come out, and he called me to say I didn't want to make the same mistake with you that I made with my brother.
Come on, man.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And I said, cool, no, let's talk about it. But he drew the line at trans, and there's only a biological man and a biological woman. And I said, well, I don't care to know you at this point anymore, man. Like, I'm done, bro. Yeah. Like, you got $50,000 of free consulting off of me, off of the, the basis of the fact that I just trying to help a young black man get out. But, like, you're going to speak that trash somewhere else, and we, blocked. So there's definitely been moments like that. And, I think that, like, we have this sense of self-importance, and I like myself a lot, especially now. So, like, we always believe our narrative to be of importance to everybody else. But the reality is that most people don't give a fuck. They're trying to live their life. They got their own things going on, man. Like, who you're sleeping with and who you're lying with and who you want to marry is not really far in the front of their conception. But there still is, experiences of distaste. My ex is very fond of saying that America is fine with homosexuality, but it struggles with gay couples. It struggles with, like, that image of, and I do see shit like that. Like, you kidding me? Like, I was down in the North End with this dude that came out from New York that's a really nice guy, and I'm kind of messing around with. And we went out to dinner, and, like, we being us, we being what any normal couple on a date would be. But, you get looks, you get sneers. One of my exes in the Boston area lived over Charlestown. We were up on his roof deck. At one point, we were, like, canoodling on his roof deck. We just ate dinner on the roof looking over the Constitution and shit. He had a very nice apartment. And we're just hanging out, and there's a dude on the building across from us, and he is leaning up, and he's wearing, like, some sort of Charlestown Irish shirt or whatever, and he's fucking staring at us. And you can see it. Like, I'm not a dummy, bro. I'm looking at this dude, and finally I'm like, what? And I yelled it across the set of building, like, what? And my dude is trying to be like, dude, calm down. I'm like, I go, I'm going downstairs right now. I'm going to see you on 4th. I'm going to be there. Right? And it took over me, like, this weird sense. So, like, these moments of reactions that do exist, man, like, I don't pretend to believe that all of the people who tell me that they're happy for me or that they're proud of me don't see my lifestyle, don't see who I am as a person as not distasteful. Like, they're still like, eh. Even my mom, we had a conversation, right? Because, like, my proclivity, everybody has a type or whatever, but, like, I like chonky boys, right? Like, that's my vibe. It is what it is, right? And so, like, my mom tried to set me up on a date, right? She ain't never done this shit. She was so excited to get to do this. Jewish mother, she was pumped. Now she's like, I finally know what's up. Now I'm going to get on. So she calls me. She's like, my friend so-and-so, her son is at Tufts. He's doing an advanced degree there, and he's new to the area. He doesn't know anybody. So I said maybe you would meet up and show him around, the Medford area, Somerville area a little bit, which is where I am. And she goes, and also he's gay. And I said, Ma, trying to set me up?
Right.
And she goes, well, and I said, is he like 6'3", 275 pounds? And she goes, no, I think he's one of those slender and sophisticated gays. That's what she said. And I go, yeah, that's not really my vibe.
Oh my God.
And she goes, with this look of just pure disappointment on her face, she goes, I know. And then she's like, looks really weird and uncomfortable. And I go, are you uncomfortable right now? And she goes, a little bit. And I go, does talking about gay sex make you uncomfortable? This is my 70-year-old mother. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, a little bit. And I go, cool. Now you know exactly how I felt. Right? Like, so like there's this weird dichotomy where like talking about two dudes together and what it is that they're doing. Like think about how many conversations you've had with other men about sexual activity with women. Mm-hmm. Think about it.
Yeah.
Now imagine that there is a dude who doesn't process that for whatever reason, or just doesn't like hearing about it, who's just there. But it's so normalized that like, what the fuck are you supposed to do about it? You know, it's like I told my buddy, I was like, hey man, we're gonna go down the alley, watch the game or whatever, right? I was like, you wanna come? I'm going with my dude Joe, who's a gay dude who lives close to me, who's a friend. And he's like, it's a gay bar, I don't know. I'm like, what the fuck? I've been going to straight bars for 15 years. You know what I mean? Like it's free. Like I gotta walk in there and watch y'all feeling up on each other and touching up on each other, trying to get with each other and all that stuff. And like you can't come into our environment and do that. It's that like it's distasteful, and it is distasteful. You know, you could see it. And so for me, the homophobia and the bigotry, man, it lives there. It lives in an expression right now up here, not like in other places in America. And somebody else said something, a very, 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 very wise gay man said to me. He said, every gay man in America has had faggot yelled at them out of the window of a moving vehicle.
Do they call each other faggots? Like if you get angry?
Do we get angry like inside the gay community?
Right, yeah.
No, I mean, there's a lot of like N-word energy to that.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean? Okay. Like, but different, you know, it's appropriations of words.
Yes.
People have, just like the black community, man, people have different opinions. You know, there are some people who feel a sense of power in reclamation. There are some people who think it's a fucking ugly ass word. Yeah. You know, same sorts of conversations that are happening there. For me, the reclamation of queer is pretty dope. I like that one more than.
It's really hard.
I mean, you wouldn't be like, "What's up, ma?"
No,
you know, like we would in our community. It's not as
okay.
But I think that's more of a. Weirdly, because race and there's a great intersectionality between LGBTQIA plus issues and race.
What's IA? I'm sorry. I
Intersexual and asexual.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And so the alphabet keeps growing. People make fun of that.
Right.
The alphabet.
Yeah.
But it's really because we're just gaining a broader understanding of sex and gender and what it means to be human. We always saw these things as binary, and they're really a fluid spectrum. Like, I hate to tell you all this, but everybody a little bit gay. You're telling me that we spent years in sports that have tight-fitting uniforms and short shorts and little tight pants that these dudes are wearing where your muscles are bulging out and there just isn't a tiny little bit of homoeroticism in that shit? Just a little wee bit, right? The butt slaps and the butt taps and the, you know, like there is. And the crazy thing is that that's okay.
So with the butt slap, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? All right.
Yeah, why am I doing this?
Right.
Why in this environment? Like, can you imagine if you did that in any other place? Like, you're sitting at your workplace and you're like, hey, Jim, could you go run those copies for me? Great job, buddy.
so no, that's really weird. I like that because if you're a male coach, you have no problem with smacking a male on the butt. But if you're a male coach coaching females, you're like, ooh, let me stay away from that, right?
You can't do that. And so that speaks to kind of the fear with which we address gender and sexuality and how that plays into our life, and also how uncompromising people are. So for me, like with trans identity, this was something, I mean, dude, I'm born in 1982. Like, to me, trans was the movie fucking Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman, you know, or like Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, you know, like that was my conception of what it meant to be trans, but that wasn't trans, that was cross-dressing, which is very different. And like, as I've come out and gained access, man, to a community that I had willfully rejected of beautiful people. Like, I am learning so much about what I did not know. Yeah. And people are willing to talk about it. They're just not willing to talk about it with somebody who's going to tell them what it means to be them. And that is the line that I draw. Listen, man, I don't talk about nobody else's narrative. I ain't said shit about your narrative. I ain't said shit about your narrative. I've only talked about mine. And I want to be really, really clear that that narrative doesn't universally apply.
Right.
There are some people who will share in it, and there are others who won't. But it's real. This shit happened to me. I'm not sitting here making up stories about my experience and my perception to feel like a victim. I go nuts when people are like, oh, it's so poor me, self-victimization.
Right.
Like, nah, man, it's not self-victimization. I was victimized by my society. I am a victim of my society. I'm not ashamed to say that I am because I'm still fucking here. So I am a survivor of that victimization. I'm standing up here to preach about what led to that victimization. I'm rejecting it in my own self and my own narrative for sure. But I'm not going to sit here and like it's the stock phrase of like, oh, you're just playing the victim. No, I'm not playing the victim.
Right.
I am the victim. It's okay to be the victim. And it is the one thing that white straight men don't get to be. And that's why it pisses them off. And that's why they want it.
You know, when they say, they start with the phrase that, you know, you just want to be the victim. Well, I mean, but this is nuanced. I recognize that I am a victim, but I refuse to remain one.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna call you out on your bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Mine.
mentioned- No, not you. No, not
please
you.
do,
No, I'm
because I
saying-
got a lot of bullshit.
My grandmother, she, you know, born and raised down south, and she was on her deathbed. And my aunt was gay. All right, she passed away from Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I remember being kept away from my aunt. Okay, because my grandmother wasn't having it. You know, my mother was, you know, of course, my aunt's sister. And there were a lot of secrets in my family.
Yeah.
So my grandmother being on her deathbed, speaking of people who will not change, my aunt is coming down from Boston and taking care of my grandmother, you know, because she's sick and, you know, it's really getting to her now. She can't move that well. Yeah. And now she's gotten to the point where she's got to clean her, you know, because hospice wasn't coming in. And so my aunt is taking care of my grandmother, and my grandmother says, and she was never okay with my aunt being gay. All right, so she says to her, and as my aunt is trying to undress her, she says, "Don't you play with my panties."
It's so
what? Like, what?
It's really it's really funny to me sometimes too, man. How like there's this weird. I've noticed that there often is like it's in the reaches of people who are struggling with this, right? With sexuality and homosexuality and alternate. I hate that phrase, alternate sexualities, right? Just sexuality,
okay,
good,
yeah.
But they're struggling with it. Is like this assumption that we can't fucking control ourselves is mad insulting.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, bro, I don't know what to tell you. Like, do y'all literally try and fuck every woman that
Jumping
you
up and
come
down
across?
everything you
And
see.
I'm scared of the answer, too.
Yeah.
Because part of the answer is like, well, we kind of talk about it, like, all the time. But, like, no, man. Like, people are capable of existing in professional situations, recognizing somebody as attractive and not, you know. And
trying
again,
to do anything.
My favorite are my straight friends who love, I mean, not in a bad way, but, like, who are into the gay attention. Like I went to lunch with my buddy from high school, Zach, whose name I'll say because we've been friends since we were 15. He was a defensive end. We called him Condor because his arms were crazy long. They like went down to like his shins. It was incredible. And we were having lunch. We went somewhere in Belmont Center actually, right? And I snapped a picture on my Twitter and I posted it to my Bear Instagram because I have my work Instagram and I have my Bear Instagram, my gay Instagram. And
so a bear is
a larger, usually hairy gay man.
Okay, see, I did not know that.
Gay men are divided into there's otters, there's bears, there's wolves, there's
just cover the animal
twinks,
kingdom.
a lot of animals.
Okay, all right.
You know, and I've had to learn because I was out of this environment for so long, willfully. Like I've had a lot of learning to do about my own community, and some of it is shitty too, man. There's a lot of like racism in the gay community. There's a lot of like classism in the gay community. There's, you know, like being a marginalized person doesn't mean that you're free from marginalizing other people, right? So like you can do that still. You don't get a free pass. It's not like you're just like, oh, you're gay, so you don't oppress people. No, like Peter Thiel is gay. He's oppressing millions of people through his funding of ridiculous shit. So, anyway, sitting there, I'm like, I'm gonna make you bear famous, bro. And I like put it up there and I like took a picture. I'm like out to dinner. I posted on my Bear Instagram. I was like, sorry boys, he's a straight fella, you know. But like his first question when I came out to him was, am I the first person you told? And I was like, no. And he's like, who'd you tell before me? I was like, my mom and Mark and Tina. He's like, you told Mark and Tina before me? Why did you do that? He was so offended that like somebody else got this secret before he did. And that was love. You know, he's like, I don't understand why you couldn't tell me. I don't understand. I want to be there for you. I want to help you with that. And he finds it hilarious. Because I'm like, yo, look at all these thirsty motherfuckers who think you're cute, bro. Like, and to be able to have that and not feel like that's weird. Right?
Yes.
That is a great test to like how accepting are you really in your heart of this reality? Like if I show you somebody be like, yo, this dude thinks you're mad fucking cute. Are you going to be like cool with that and giggly about it, happy about it? Or are you going to try to play off like you're okay with it, but really what you're thinking is, man, fuck that gay shit. And like that is the masculine battle, right? That exists in straight masculinity as I see it all the time is like somehow like my gayness affects you. Right? Like, and it doesn't. Like, what does it matter to you? Your life ain't changing other than the fact that we met, had a cup of coffee together, talked into these microphones for 2 hours. You're going to go home and live your life. I'm going to go home and live mine. And hopefully our paths will cross again and we get to do some cool shit. But, like, this notion that existence affects your existence or your existence just by virtue of the fact that I like penis, like, is absurd. Well, it's like when you say it out loud, it's like fucking comical. Like what? Like what the fuck, bro? Like I've had people show me fucking porn, like on their phone, and just be like, "Yo, look at this," and it's straight porn. Can you imagine if I did that with like what I watch?
Oh, I could imagine. I could imagine. Yeah.
And I was just like, "Yo, look at this shit," and it's crazy to me, man. Now that like porn has a lot of problems as an industry, as porn. Full stop, whether it's gay or straight. But, I mean, I've literally had coworkers, men, coaches, people, friends at a bar just like, find a graphic video, a sexually graphic video, and they would just throw that shit across the table at you and put it in your face, and you were supposed to look at it. And then you start to think about like, man, I got to react to this. So if somebody turns a picture as like an Instagram model or something in a bikini sitting at church in our coach's office, not real church, we used to call our meeting room church, right? We're sitting in our coach's office, another coach turns this thing over, slides it over to me, right? And they're like, yo, look at her. I have to react to that. Yeah. Right? And it has to be, I literally have to act because what I'm thinking, like, I'm capable of seeing beauty. Yeah. And I'm like, nah, she's a beautiful woman. Yeah. But I'm not responding to that beauty the same way that he's responding to that beauty, but I believe that I need to let him know that I am responding to it the same way that he is so that he trusts me and he doesn't think that I'm, funny like that. Yeah.
You just called me. So you call it church? Oh, I think that's hilarious.
It's hilarious.
Considering what the Catholic Church has done throughout history. I'm just laughing at
church was, we called church the segment of our meeting where everybody would debrief. Yep. And if you had, anybody could say anything. Yeah. That was the purpose of church. Nice. After every practice, if you had a beef, if you had a problem, right, you would talk about what you did well, talk about what you did poorly. We went around the table. Sam probably remember this, right? We went around the table. Everybody had to say one good thing you did coaching, one bad thing you did coaching.
Be real. Go to church.
And if you had beef, because nothing kills a team. Like, put your beef on the fucking table. Be a grown human being and say, hey, man, I kind of had a problem with how you talked to me today. And I'll be like, really? Why don't you tell me about that? And let's talk about that. And if I think it's not a problem, I'll be like, look, I got to be perfectly honest with you. I got to run my team. I'm sorry that you were offended, but this is what it is.
That's one of the issues in sports. Coaches won't speak to their players directly. It's always general. And the players have problems with that. They want to know.
You got to speak on equal terms.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I want to do as we are really up against it time-wise is I want to give you an opportunity if you want. I think you had a segment from your book that you, if you would like to. It's
yeah, we can put it down, and I mean, I was saying to Sam, and if you don't like it, y'all can cut it in post production, But whatchamacallit, I was trying to figure out what section to really read because there's a lot of different sections.
There's no bear on the screen.
What's that?
There's no bear on the screen.
There's no bear. Oh my God, Bobby, there can be. Careful what you wish for.
Oh,
But since we kind of talked a little bit about this, I'll read this section because it was I got to find it now. I'll definitely read this section. It's from the section that's called. This is part 7 so far. Where the hell am I now? Nope. Because we are pushed up on time. Here we go. And it's called Status Quo. So it's really talking about my transition into head coaching, So, I'll read a little section of that because we talked a little bit about that. By 2014, life had reached a status quo of precarious balance. For the next 5 years, I would feel something like a tightrope walker, carefully placing one foot in front of the other, feeling for the wind, trusting that technique and practice would carry me across just this once. For each time, that was all I needed. One more walk across the expanse and space to plan for the next one. 7 years to my tenure at Matanon and professionally comfortable, I was resolved to be a career educator and to do so in this place. I told myself that being a big fish in a small pond wasn't so bad, that this was where I could actually affect some manner of functional social change. And I began to tell people that I had visions of being a principal one day. If I had been an established entity in this place before, now I was sliding into becoming a part of the institution itself. Older siblings told their younger brothers and sisters, wait until you have Coach Q. And every year in the yearbook, when the seniors listed their defining everyday school experiences in the you went to Matanon when section, there was something about me walking through the halls singing to myself on an off period or catching someone with their phone during a school assembly. And this transition in my life, from job to career, from the sense of options remaining to the reality of decisions already made, was palpable. In an instant, life became prescribed and routine. And with that routine came ease. I am not sure if life is ever meant to be this way. Certainly not with an ongoing suppression of self. Mostly, I suppose, I felt the environment was controllable, that I had learned to play the game here and was becoming adept at it. Everything and everyone were known entities in this place and at this point, myself included in that. And predictability is an asset, perhaps the asset, when you're hiding in plain sight. Football life was a double down as well. After 2 years as a defensive coordinator at School B, I was hired as the head coach at Belmont High, tasked with revitalizing a program that had gone 1-21 over the past 2 seasons. For me, this was the culmination of an identity and professional path that I had spent 10 years simultaneously crafting and navigating, not only to satisfy career ambitions, but protective instincts as well. Over all this time, football had become my constant, my source of affirmation, where I cemented my masculinity, where I disappeared, and increasingly, my excuse for being antisocial and receding into my cave. As I stepped into the mantle of head coach, I was equal parts proud and terrified. For while this was the realization of so many of my hopes and dreams for my future, it also threw me into a local spotlight, a managerial spotlight, a cultural spotlight, and spotlighted my failure to fulfill the conventional social markers that this particular segment of America valued. The booster moms expected a Mrs. Q. I know this because they told me so. I shrugged them off. I'm married to the game, I said half-jokingly. I'm like Randy Shannon. Though it wasn't just the booster moms. I wasn't a piece of a staffing puzzle anymore. I was the piece. And I felt the mantle of being exemplary for both my players and my staff. This meant fulfilling their expectations not only for stock qualities like character and leadership, but for more socially connected ones like manhood and toughness. In lots of ways, our program was different. We centered ourselves in unconditional love as our defining ideal, connected toughness to vulnerability, and embraced failure in the immediate as a progressive stepping stone in our long-term path to success. We carried this banner of difference proudly into the community, working diligently to change perceptions of football and football coaches. My primary assistants and I lived at the school. I had brought Dave with me from Stoneham. He had played for me at Mattanon in 2007 as a serviceable center, and now he was my young firebrand, just like I had been for Bob. And I felt warm and cyclical as we slogged our way through weight room sessions and spring season baseball and lacrosse games, where we would chat up parents concerned about giving their children over to such a violent game. Especially at a time when the long-term effects of concussive and subconcussive impacts were dominating conversation about the sport. Will Smith would be nominated for an Oscar for concussion the following year. 99% of the time, I told them, you'd be justified in those concerns. But you found the exception. And I believed that when I said it. This was the public face. We were better than most behind closed doors, too. But it would be naive to think we were immune from the running undercurrent of this particular river, especially in the coach's office, though it seeped into our program culture and player interactions as well. This speaks to how central traditional American masculinity is to this particular game. Even a brown, closeted, gay high school head coach couldn't fully escape it or change it. In fact, he even had to trumpet some of it himself in order to be taken seriously for the conceptions of leadership and strength that I felt the pressure of exemplifying for my staff were connected to whether or not they viewed me as a man worth following. By my estimation, this was connected to whether or not they viewed me as a straight man. And this is something that I imagine every single gay man in football has felt and does feel, because it never goes away. Some of this data I gathered from explicit moments, like when an assistant coach said jokingly, "Nah, I ain't down with no gay shit like that," during a coach's conversation that had wandered into the topic somewhat uncomfortably for me of our attitudes towards homosexuality. Or when after a fundraising drive run by a private fundraising company, the owner of that company and I stood outside talking after the money count, and he revealed that his Christian identity meant that he just believed some things to be absolute truths, one of which was that homosexuality was plain wrong and gay marriage an insult to a holy sacrament. Then he told me it was a blessing to know me and work with me, and got in his car to head home, with his 10K cut, of course. Most of the data, however, just was. Like wind or rain, a basic and unavoidable part of existing that rested outside of my control. In that sense, I just put on a poncho and went about my day. This is the last paragraph. When I was a young boy, I lived with my mother for 4 years in Thailand, where she was posted with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Everything about life was new then, and my memory of it all is spotty. But I remember the rainy season. Big, fat Forrest Gump type rain that fell for weeks, months even, giving life a damp weight and consistency. This faded blip of memory is the closest I can get to describing this period of my life, when the closet had become wholly the norm for me as I pushed forward into my 30s and more adult professional ambitions. It was no longer an if I was going to have to confront myself in some manner over the course of the day, nor even a when, but a question of how many times, how much damage, and how to keep all that came with this locked away. While the explicit moments defined for me that who I actually was as a person was not welcome here, in this space, these did not make the rainy season. For these were quick bursts of storm, complete with lightning bolts and swirling winds, as quick and violent in their departure as in their performance. It was the seemingly innocuous that brought in the damp, moments rooted in cultural acceptability and nonchalance. Those offhand comments from a booster mom, an assistant with wandering eyes who couldn't see a woman walk past on the sidewalk that ran alongside our practice field without commenting on her. Another one killing time before practice, scrolling on Instagram, turning the phone around and sliding it across the table to display a woman in lingerie or something of the like. And the culture of the kids
and the American high school experience chimed in on it all. Ever since I started with football as a player, I heard coaches talk on how this sport made good citizens and good leaders and good workers and good fathers and good husbands. These images were rife with implications of heteronormativity and likely contributed to my sense of being an other before I even really knew I was one. As I took the mantle of my program, I found myself saying these same words, as though it were nothing more than reflex. Once again, adding bricks to the very same walls keeping me from myself. And since in many ways, a lot of coaches are reliving their youth in some way, shape, or form, that also includes reliving the locker room, where attitudes towards sex and sexuality live as well. This operates simultaneously on multiple levels, like a dramatic British miniseries about an aristocratic house and their servants. Upstairs in the coach's office, the boys who look like men play in their locker room. And downstairs, the boys who are still boys do just the same. These two worlds interact around these topics almost never. But to say they never interact would be disingenuous, if only because, as my grandmother used to say, little pitchers have big ears. But this too is incomplete, because it implies that this process was osmosis of the dominant and nothing more. We had culpability here as professionals. We gave too much latitude to this space for whatever our own individual reasons. As each year I watched our closed-door roast your coach skits during camp increasingly walk the thin line of acceptable, it felt irrationally like something I could not prevent without exposure. We had done this at School A and again at School B, so I did it here. This is how the concept of the other reinforces itself over time, without any real thought. Because somewhere in that sea of players who I stood in front of over the years was another me. Another little gay kid trying to figure it all out.
Wow.
It's a good stop.
Yeah.
I think it speaks a little bit to a lot of what we were kind of getting at today.
I agree. Q, I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing your story with us. I really once again thank you for coming in.
Oh man,
and
thank you
sharing
guys
it.
for having me, man. It was really an honor to be here and to talk with y'all. Y'all are dope as fuck. So
We appreciate you being here. Man. It's cool.
I'll be listening. I'll be listening, not just to the one I'm on.
I appreciate it.
No, thank you guys, man. Thank you very much. Buy the book, The Hippo Inside.
The Hippo Inside. Shout out.